welcome back to another episode of Chats in the Blog Cabin. The show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we're chatting with Pamela Gail Johnson, and she's chatting about happiness. I mean, that's a loaded subject, isn't it, Pamela?
Well, we try to make it realistic. So practical happiness. We want to be realistic with our happiness, because I think it makes it less loaded if we view it from a prism of realism.
That's true. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into your book, Practical Happiness.
Well, I started a group almost 25 years ago now, in 1998, called the Society of Happy People. It was actually called the Secret Society of Happy People at the time. We dropped the word secret when we were 20 years old. But basically, it was just kind of saying, where are all the happy people? It was the real question. And then we were really asking people, are you happier than you admit you are? And by that, I mean, what are you talking about? Because words have power. Words have meaning. So if we only talk about the things in life that we aren't liking, that kind of attracts more of them, versus if we also can balance that by talking about, the things that make us feel good, the things that make us, in essence, happy. So that was kind of the premise of it. And we started the first happiness holiday, Admit Your Happy Day, which is now Happiness Happens Day, on August 8th. And then the next year that expanded to a month. And then in January, we added Hunt for Happiness Week. So it's just been like 20 something plus years of doing happiness stuff. And now I coach and I speak and I work with organizations about how to create a more engaged workplace, which is also kind of a dotted line to happiness. Happier workers are more engaged, which then adds to a whole bunch of happy workplace ripples. Everything from productivity to, profits to just being more fun. We spend a lot of time at work, so we need to make sure we enjoy those hours every week.
So how did you get into diving into the subject of happiness? Because that's something that, a lot of people don't think about that's being their life's work, but that seems to be your life work, especially since you said you've been doing it for over 25 years in this society.
Well, I would say I stumbled into it and that probably started it. I was actually working in the self-help field at the time. I was working for an organization called the Hazelden Foundation. So I was actually I was working in the treatment center side at that point. They're a substance abuse treatment center, but at the time they also had a very large publishing arm that I eventually worked in. And it was also the height of like Oprah Winfrey and Jerry Springer. So I'd say it's the height of the self-help movement. Dr. Laura, talk radio is, what podcasts are now. There were just lots of talk radio shows about self-help. And I thought, we spend a lot of time trying to be happier, essentially. I mean, that's why you do self-help and personal improvement and personal development. You're trying to feel good and be the best version of yourself. But there was really nobody kind of out there for, like, if you were somebody who was just mostly happy just because, kind of saying, hey, it's okay to just be happy. And then as I delved into it, I started realizing that mental health, for all the talk about mental health and how we do discuss it, didn't really address teaching people how to be happier. Even when the positive psychology movement came out, there's this assumption that if we have a lack of what I call happiness zappers, or a lack of challenges, then we're happy. It's just the byproduct. Happiness is a byproduct. And it's really not always the byproduct. I mean, sometimes it can be a byproduct, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes we have to put effort into it. I know plenty of people who don't have a lot of, chaos, drama, happiness zappers, health issues, in their life, and they're not necessarily happy. And I know in my book, I did 60 stories, and some of the interviews I did, I didn't know their story before I started talking to them. And some of them have stories that, just touch your heart, and you look at the challenges that they've overcome, but they also said, hey, I'm also going to be happy. I'm not going to not be happy. That also doesn't mean that if I'm feeling bad or I'm dealing with sadness or whatever I'm dealing with, it doesn't mean I don't acknowledge it, but I don't let it consume me to the point I am not going to be happy. So it does show that happiness to some degree, and I don't like the words happiness as a choice, because you never want somebody, especially if they're dealing with what I call true unhappiness. You don't want somebody not going through their emotions and acknowledging their emotions and where they're at. But happiness also takes work. I think we have to put effort into it. And sometimes people just forget that. And sometimes the effort is simple. It's just noticing every single time we feel good. But we oftentimes just take that for granted. We just assume, we minimize that while we maximize the times that, like, just the minor annoyance makes us feel bad. Like, we're sitting in traffic. We just will let that consume us for minutes, hours, even a day, instead of just saying, hey, that was an annoyance. Let's, let it go. And I'm where I needed, I got where I needed to be. So again, it's a lot of effort, and we sometimes we don't want to put that effort into maintaining our happy.
Yeah, it's something as simple as noticing, like, if you find a penny, how happy that can make you. So when you see a coin, or like going back to almost like childhood, when you can pick up a flower or a dandelion and just blow it in the breeze and stuff like that, almost like in a childlike quality, correct?
Well, it is a childlike quality, yet it's such an important quality, because the truth is, most of us, when we do see a penny, we go back to that saying in our head, find a penny, pick it up, and all day long we'll have good luck. Like, this just automatically plays in our head. And in that moment, we usually do feel good. It raises our vibe. It raises our energy. And when we're in that space, the better we feel, the easier it is to deal with our zappers. The more productive we're going to be. You're going to be there. We sometimes act like, I see all these people on Facebook, they get annoyed when they see somebody post something, happy in their life, and they're like, yeah, I know that person, and I know that's not their life. And I'm like, well, it's not anybody's 24/7 life, but it was a slither. Even if it was just the moment that picture was taken, even if it was just that 15 seconds that it happened, that was a slither, and that's what they want to share with you. They want to share that feel good slither, and there's nothing wrong with that. No one has this just pure feel good day. And the examples I use on that is, we all, or the vast majority of us, would agree that a funeral is a sad event. Yet I've never really been to a funeral that you also did not have people that knew that person sharing in smiles and feel good moments of nostalgia, which is one of our 31 types of happiness. There are still feel good moments in that bigger moment of sadness. I have never, I personally am still single. I'm in the chronically single column. I've never been married, so it wasn't my wedding, but I've never attended a wedding or been in a wedding that the bride and groom aren't dealing with some stress, because you just don't know what's going to happen. Something is going to falter. You're going to have some relative that decides to dance on a table, or, take over the karaoke machine, or whatever's going on. There will be moments of stress associated with even a time that, again, most of us would universally say is a happy occasion. So that's where life is interconnected. It's simultaneous. We have both. The question is, do we embrace the happy? Do we remember it? Do we give it its big credence? And do we manage what doesn't make us happy? How do you manage, like, you have a podcast, so you're full of technology. I'm sure there's some chaos that comes with that some days.
Yes.
How do you manage your something that makes you not feel so happy?
First, I kind of let myself feel in the moment, like, okay, I'm not happy. I just let it feel. I just let it go. But then I'm like, okay, what can I do on the positive side of this? What can I do instead of, like, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, my computer completely, like, would not come on or anything. And it was like total, like, chaos. I was on the phone for like almost a day and a half with Apple trying to figure out how to get it back up. And it was awful. And I was like, okay, I prayed, and I just got this peace over me. And I was like, you know what? Instead of doing this, let me go over and do something else I need to do. And I actually rearranged my office, which made the creativity flow a lot better, because that's one thing I love to do, is to kind of get and change things around a little bit to make it look a little bit better, So I rearranged my office. I'm sure it won't be the last time I rearrange it this year, but still. But going back to what you were talking about, the funeral, my sister just passed away in May, and it was very stressful because my oldest daughter lives in California, and she was supposed to, as I said before, I'm in North Carolina. She was supposed to fly in, and it was during the time that all these flights were getting canceled or delayed, and she was not able to come in, and she was one of the speakers. But we luckily had technology. We were talking about how technology can be a good thing and a bad thing. She was able to zoom in on technology and actually speak at the funeral, whereas way back in the day, she would have just missed everything. And so that was a good thing. And she also made a joke about how when all the grandkids, there's 5 nieces and nephews, when all the nieces and nephews were in high school, their shoe game was on point because of my sister, because she worked at a shoe store. So they had all the name brand shoes, and everybody just started laughing. And so it's just, you're right. You have to take the good and the bad. You have to pick out your points. And, sometimes sadness does come with happiness, with the memories, but it's still.
Yeah, in the case of a funeral, little slithers of happiness, especially the closer you are to the person who's no longer with us, it doesn't overtake the sadness. I call grief unhappiness. That's the one. Anytime we're grieving a loss, whether it's literally a death or maybe it's a health thing you've had to change your whole lifestyle on, or whatever the loss is, I consider that like unhappiness, because there's an ebb and flow to it. You don't just go, okay, I went to the funeral and now I'm not sad anymore. That's not how it works. You can see somebody at the grocery store that looks like the person, and you're like, all of a sudden you can have a dagger in your heart. So it's and that can be 10 years later even. It's a windy road. But again, having said that, you do reach a point, or even at the time, there will be those stories that you can, hold in your heart, and it makes your heart smile a little bit, even if your face is crying. So it's kind of going on at the same time. And that's what life is. It's not usually just 100% exclusively happy or exclusively unhappy. It's this intertwined place, and it's how do we, like I said, manage those things that are happiness zappers, as I call them, and how do we embrace all of those moments that do make us feel good, and how do we make that happen? And that's what I call practical happiness. It's when we allow ourselves to go with that flow, regardless of what emotion you're in.
That's so true. And it's so important, because it's important to feel all the emotions, to feel the whole gambit, because if not, that's when your mental health starts to suffer as well.
Well, right, because you're not being authentic to yourself and who you are, and your soul knows that. Your soul starts screaming like, hey, you're only pretending things are good when maybe they are challenging. Maybe you are dealing with the sadness. Maybe you did have a career change that you didn't plan on, and you're like, your new boss is like, no, you're not really as nice as my old boss, and I'm really missing my old boss, and I'm really sad. And you'll work through it however you work through it. But that emotion of not feeling good is also as real as the other emotion. Or if you deal with anxiety, you need to make sure you have coping techniques to manage those, and those may be different for you than someone else, but you have to acknowledge it. As I always like to say about happiness zappers, you have to acknowledge them so you can manage them, or they manage you.
So true. Now we have to take a brief commercial break, but we'll be right back, and you're going to read part of your book when we come back, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Getting my 40s eyes on.
Hi, my name is Joanna, and I would like to share with you a little bit about Shores of Grace, Shores Philly. It's a ministry located in Philadelphia. The portion of Shores that I volunteer for goes into Kensington, an area greatly impacted by homelessness and addiction. And we go and we take love, food, clothing, snacks, conversation. We believe that it is a way that we can meet people right where they are and show them the love of Jesus. We have seen lives changed in big ways and in small ways. and we've built wonderful relationships with the people in the community. We have big plans, more we'd like to do, and we would appreciate any support, either through prayer or through donation. If you would like to donate, you can go to shoresofgrace.com, and in the menu, click on Donate. And we just ask that you put Philly in your donation comments. Thank you.
And we are back with Pamela. Pamela, are you ready to read your book?
I am. I have picked the last chapter called Living a Life of Practical Happiness, a little excerpt from that. In ancient China, the Taoists taught that a constant inner smile, a smile to oneself, ensured health, happiness, and longevity. Why? Smiling to yourself is like basking in love. You become your own best friend. Living with an inner smile is to live in harmony with yourself. And that was from Mentek Chai. In a realistic way, practical happiness means that by managing your happiness zappers and experiencing more of the happiness around you, you'll keep your inner smile. Our mindset and experiences have the power to unleash the happiness inside of us. When we choose to live in the present, feel all our feelings, the good and the bad, and actively look for all the happiness that occurs moment to moment in the complex web of our lives, it's possible to feel good more, smile more, and improve your life so that ultimately you live your happiest life.
I love it. And I will say that I downloaded the book on Audible, and you're reading the book on Audible as I'm listening to it. I'm like, it's like the same person, you know.
Yes, HCI was awesome. They helped me get to audition. I had to audition to read my own book, but they helped me get to audition to read the book, and I did get to read it. And it's not a professional reading, if you're wanting a professional reader, but it is an authentic reading. It was me, and I also realized that was like a harder job than I would have anticipated. I was like, wow, I am a poor reader. I keep skipping words.
But I think it's more authentic when you, especially on Audible or Kindle, when you're hearing the author reading the words as opposed to a paid professional, because then you get more of the feeling behind the words.
No, I agree. I downloaded some, best-selling famous author's book the other day, or maybe it was like a while back, maybe before I did mine, because I was like, I just want to hear how they're reading their book, and it wasn't them. And I was like, and I'm sure they would have had the option to read their book, and they would have been a good, they were like a famous TED Talk speaker and stuff. But I guess they just decided that was, it was tedious. It was more tedious than I expected. But I also was disappointed because I'm like, I wanted to hear their voice reading the book. So
and I was, you also get a feel of who the author is.
HCI helped.
Now let's talk about the Society of Happy People. Let's talk about that. How did you form that? Why did you decide to form that since you founded it?
Well, I was actually teaching personal empowerment workshops at the time, and people wanted me to start a newsletter. So this is pre-internet. So like you weren't doing an e-zine. You actually had to write a newsletter, have it typeset, take it to an actual printer. They would print it on pages. 2-color was expensive. 4-color was virtually impossible. But all your best people like Deepak Chopra, people like that had a print newsletter going out from their publisher. But so they were like, you need to start a newsletter. And I'm like, well, it's kind of like a lot of work. But I tried to think about it. And I was just playing with what would I put in a newsletter? Like if I were to do a newsletter on empowerment, what would that be? And that was kind of a buzzword of the 80s or 90s. I guess it was 90s and late 90s. And I was like, well, what is empowerment? And I'm like, in some ways, empowerment is when you get to a point that you can look at a past learning experience that you maybe felt unempowered in. Let's say you had a bad boss, or you had you weren't treated well as well at school as you would have liked to have been. But you can look back and you can kind of grin about the lessons. You can sort of see some of the humor and the experiences. Not all. There's certain experiences that will scar you, but there are also certain experiences that you go, yeah, that was kind of funny now. So I was like, on the back of my newsletter, I want a humor column. And so I was like, well, what would that column be? And then I was like, where are all the happy people? And then I start seeing people standing around, and I'm like, they have their own club and they just don't tell anybody about it. They're a secret society. I was like, they're the secret society of happy people. And then I'm seeing them wearing like Mardi Gras style type masks in case a parade rainer burst in. So I was telling people about my fabulous humor column idea, because I was like, maybe I should pitch this as a humor column somewhere. And people were like, well, let me know when you start it. I want to join. And I was like, well, that's again a lot of work. I was thinking humor column. So, but eventually, about a year later, I started the society, and I think it's and I there's times I think, oh, it's time for it to end, but it's time for me to not be leading it. And at this point, things like Happiness Happens month and day, if you just go Google it, they're going to outlive me. As long as we have an internet, we have people out celebrating those kinds of things. Sometimes people don't even know they're connected to the society. But it still seems to serve its purpose, because we still need to be reminded that happiness, we need to celebrate every bit of happiness we can when we can. We need to remember that it needs to be part of our conversation, even if and sometimes a lot of people want to lump it into gratitude, and they're like, well, you should do your gratitude journal. And I'm like, well, some days, not every day. And we should always acknowledge the things to be grateful for. But I know, as a mostly happy person, I will have some days that, gratitude, I just can't feel it. Like, I may know, my head maybe can make a list of 100 things, but I just can't feel it because there's something bigger going on in a chaotic realm for me. And I always remind people that happiness is sometimes little stair steps. So let's say you can't feel grateful. Maybe you can find something that amused you. Maybe it's that funny cat video that just made you grin a little bit. Or maybe it's just you're smiling inside. So it might not be big. It could just be teeny. Maybe when you finally get the kids to bed and the house is quiet and you finally get to sit on your sofa for 5 minutes and hear 5 minutes of straight silence, there can be relief. Or you may have a moment of peace that you're like, okay, if I have a moment of peace. And so you're not in that I'm laughing, having a good time, fun vibration type of happiness, or even in a gratitude type of happiness, you may not be there. And I always tell people that's okay, because it's just a stair step. And if you keep taking these little stair steps, you're going to get there. It just may not be in this hour. It may not be this moment. It may be another day before you can get there, but it will come full circle. But if you just do it a little bit, if you just let yourself feel a little better, that's why I define happiness as feeling good in the moment, naturally feeling good in the moment, so that can vary depending on what the moment you had before was.
Yeah. So how can people join the Society of Happy People? Is there a membership thing or whatever?
If you go to sohp.com, you can scroll down and you kind of become, there's actually official membership packages. We go in and out on those. So I added those back this year because people have been wanting to join the society, and you get a few extra goodies when you join. And so, yeah, we do have that membership option. And it does start with like a love offering, but you get a quarterly call with me and, some fun, some fun goodies, a membership badge. We have a membership badge that goes out every quarter of letting people know you're a member. And then if you just want to get something from the society, you can just go to sohp.com/gift, and I will give you the 31 types of happiness counter. So you can take that 31 types of happiness and take the last 30 minutes or take the last hour and go say, hey, how many types of these have I experienced? It's a rare time in 20 something years that people don't walk away going, wow, I was a little happier than I thought I might have been. Again, I had somebody one time who had 0 happy moments. I've only had one person who had 0 happy moments in the previous hour or two, but it happens. It can happen to somebody. So if it does happen, don't feel bad about it. Just look at those other types of happiness to see if you've had some in the next hour. Just it might open up your thinking. In the book, we have stories about each of the 31 types of happiness to help you think about how you might experience it. Like, this is how they've experienced it, but it will broaden your definition a little bit of what you think of as happiness. And so that's always a fun way to raise your vibe and feel a little bit happier.
What I love about your book is at the end of each little section, you have a management action plan tips that actually is something that people can like put into use. So can you give us an example of one of them? So for people that are listening.
Well, I think the most popular would be creating like your Zap map. So I call that a Zapper management action plan. And I don't have my wand. I usually actually have a wand because I just like to be silly sometimes. And so a wand can be anything from a stick to, actually, I could have a wand. It could even be a pencil. I was coaching somebody the other day and their boss was like annoying. So I was like, okay, you can always pick up a pencil at work or a pen because nobody's going to think anything about it. And I just want you to zap your boss in zapping energy of being nicer. Like, just do that. Nobody's going to think you're, likewise, I have a fairy wand with sparklies on it because I'm that. But actually, my lightsaber is one of my favorite wands. So, but a Zap map tool is what you do is you identify the zapper, you identify the type of zapper it is. So we have unhappiness, stress, chaos, fear, and annoyances. You identify if it was controllable or uncontrollable, and then you create your action plan. So if it's actually purely uncontrollable, let's say it's raining and raining and raining and you're tired of the rain, but you still have to go to the store. That's not something you can control, but you can control how you dress. You can control if you take an umbrella. So you can control that element of it. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. Like, oh, I got up late, I got stuck in traffic, and I'm late for my appointment. You can control when you leave. Like, so I try to, if I have to be somewhere on time, because I tend to run late, I will control the part of like, I tell myself my appointment's 15 minutes early, just so I'm usually there on time, just to give me time for traffic. But it makes me set my alarm earlier. That's the part I can control. Now, if I get stuck on the freeway in a parking lot, I can't control that, but I can control if I call and tell them, hey, I'm stuck in a parking lot. I can send you a picture or whatever. But I will, well, if you're my friend, I sometimes am just a little bit late. But, that's what you can control. If it's something you can 100% control, like your reaction. Let's say when I taught empowerment classes, one of the things I would ask my newly sober patients, as in maybe some of them had less than a day and some had up to 30 days. But I would say, let's pretend you and I are having a disagreement and you're sitting in your chair and you're looking at me, sharing your feelings or sharing your issues. And I'm just yelling and wailing my arms and screaming. Which of the two of us is empowered? And many times people think it's me, but I'm like, I want you to really, really think about this. Who is empowered? And it's the person who's not letting me push their buttons. It's the person who's not reactionary. And I said, but what usually happens is you start wailing back at me. And then we have two wailing people attempting to resolve a problem. What are the odds? Like we might as well go buy a lottery ticket because we probably have about as bad as those odds are. We probably have a better odds of winning it than solving the problem in that moment, because that's not going to happen. So we always can control our reaction. And that's an important part. So that's how you would create what I call a Zap map. And if you get the book, there's a link on there to tell you how to get one of the Zap maps. So you have it with you. And anybody who does a review on the book, I will actually give you a workbook of all the activities, because the book does have a lot of activities. So if you do a review, there's a email address to send me that you did a review, and I'll send you an actual workbook for practical happiness so you can continue doing the activities.
See, I love that, because a lot of people, they're like want you to do reviews, but then they just like, okay, you're done, you're fine. A lot of people that send out books, but I love how you reward that, and you want to make sure that the happiness stays along, that what they read in your book is something that stays with them a while, not just, okay, I've read it, it stays with me about a month, okay, I'm done, oh, now I'm back to being so-called sad again because it didn't stick.
Well, I find that, like, people, even if you did the stuff in your book, the first principle is happiness is personal, but the third principle is happiness changes as you change. So you may do all these activities this year, but next year some things may have changed, and so I want you to be able to keep printing them off and to do them again, because I do coaching, and a lot of times when I do coaching, for the most part, and you never know, somebody can stump you, but I can say with 90% certainty that most of the time when people are having a happiness challenge, it falls into one of those 4 principles that if you're applying it, you will find more happiness. Again, it may not mean we get rid of your problems, because depending on the problem, let's say you bring home a newborn, and I kind of joke that the first 3 or 4 years of that new child's life, you're kind of on call 24/7. Mm-hmm. It's different reasons. Initially it's feeding and things like that, but eventually they're crawling around and you're like, yeah, there's a light socket there, and you're having to watch, like, is there a cord in the floor? Is there, what's going on? I got to keep and then they move to the climbing phase, and everything is a jungle gym. And so again, you just got to have eyes all over your head, and you don't sleep and you're exhausted. And so you go through these phases of challenges that are going to change, but they're changing phases, and that's our life. Sometimes we're not as dramatic as that, but our life constantly changes, and how we apply that, find our happiness, is to, again, honor that and find more happiness. And like I said, manage zappers. Our zappers will change. What I say about stress is, while stress is a zapper one day, might not be a zapper the next day. It's like, if I don't get enough sleep last night, everything stresses me today because I'm just physically tired. If I slept enough, you not calling to tell me XYZ, I might, okay, oh well, whatever. Whereas if I'm exhausted, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling rejected because they didn't call to tell me whatever they were supposed to tell me. And again, it's very fluid, and that's why the practical part of practical happiness is giving yourself the luxury to navigate those changes as they need to be, those zappers, or your happiness is personal, or whatever it is. It's giving yourself that permission to go with that flow. And I think we live in a culture that doesn't like to do that sometimes. We want to say, well, when you were 25, you said you liked cherry ice cream, and you're like, yeah, but now I'm 35 and I've decided my new favorite flavor is chocolate mint. And you know what? That's okay. That is okay. And we don't always, we sometimes feel like we can't do that.
And I love the way you brought that up, because in different places, stages of life, happiness is different. Like when you're like when you're parenting as well, you're happy when your child is like healthy and fed and not crying. And then as they're progressing and they don't need you as much, then you're happy if they're happy and they're married and they have a good life. And then you're like, okay, what do I do next? And then you realize your happiness doesn't revolve around your children, and it revolves around what you find out your next story in life. So it's almost like parenting as well.
Well, yeah. And actually, I have one of the stories in the book is from a woman, Kristen, she was telling me about when she took her 3rd child off to college, and she was a little worried about a lot of the stories she had heard about empty nesting. Now, I don't want to ruin her story, so I'll let the readers read it or listen to it, whichever's their cup of tea. But it's how she navigated that beginning phases of empty nest syndrome. And yeah, I talk to parents all the time, or when I talk to people who are parents, it's like when they're little, you're like, yes, I had 5 minutes to go to the bathroom by myself. I'm so happy, because they'll start following you into the bathroom or whatever. So your happiness is just that 5 minutes alone. But then by the time they're in their teen years, you're like, I'm just so happy they want to have a meal with me, even if it's just for 20, 30 minutes. Like, I actually had a conversation with my child today, and it changes. And it's the same thing for us pretty much in all areas of our life. our professional life, our just there's really no facet of our life that will not change based on our experiences and how those experiences impacted us. And I sometimes think that we forget that, and they can still, those experiences may last a really long time, and they don't, especially things connected to unhappiness. They can change our whole perspective on, I know people who are healthier in their 50s and 60s because they had a health scare and they actually did what the doctors are asking them to do, and then they do get super healthy than they were in their, say, 30s. Like, you just never know when you have this experience. And you call them health nuts because they're like at the gym every day, and again, nobody knows what those catalysts are that will cause us to make changes that do ultimately make us happier and healthier and all of those things.
That is so true. Our time is almost up, but I always ask, is there one thing that you want to leave us with? Like one little nugget, like that you want to leave? Besides where people can find you, we'll get to that in just a minute.
Well, I think people have to remember their happiness is personal. And it sounds super obvious. We sort of know it, but we also live in such a group think society. We're group thinked because of social media. We're group thinked because we live in a 24/7 news cycle that tells the same stories over and over and over. So we don't necessarily go research whatever it is ourselves with independent sources. We just start parroting what people say. We're groupthink because we've also decided we're on, we sort of want to just hang out with people who think exactly like us, which is sort of sad, because if we do that, we don't learn. We don't learn. And that can be, our age, or that can be our college football team, or our professional hockey team, whatever it is. We sometimes decide that everybody around us has to be sort of in the same mindset we are. Like, we only want to hang out with people who quilt or make their very own jam. And we really have to do, and I think that also impedes our happiness as personal, because we start not recognizing what makes us happy. We sometimes only do what our spouse wants, or only do what our kids want. And of course, we should never be like, oh, I don't want to go see the murder mystery movie because I don't like those movies, and you're my significant other, and I know it's important to you, but I don't ever do that, because it's just not that. You don't want to be selfish. It's okay to do other types of happiness, like love. Like, okay, I get my significant other really loves watching Sunday football, and so I'm going to be nice and watch at least a quarter of a game with him. I'm going to be nice, and I will bring him his beer or his favorite beverage, whatever that is, or I'm going to cook dinner so he can be enjoying his day. It doesn't mean you don't want to do that, because that's somebody you love, and giving is a type of happiness, and contributing to that. But it also means if you want to go to the ballet, whether that person goes or not, you still need to make time to do that, because you're like, hey, I love the Nutcracker. I love this. This is my Christmas tradition. I want to do it. Or if you need to go to the beach, or you want to read a romance novel, whatever it is, or you want to just go watch, I love Hallmark, so I'm going to watch a lot of Hallmark Christmas movies. It's just, I still have to make time to do that, because if I forget my happiness is personal and I don't include it in my life, it doesn't mean I only do that, but if I don't include it, I quit relating to happiness, because I'm not ever feeling what's important to me and what's important to me at that time of my life. So I always tell people, I think of all the activities in the book, when I ask people to write their happiness as personal list, I think it's 5. It's only 5 things. Some people can't come up with 5 things that's their happiness is personal. And I think that is so important for you to acknowledge, to know what it is, so you can then try to, include it, and redo that list every quarter, or redo that list once a year. But, redo that list, because it can change. And guess what? That's okay too.
I love that. And I love how you said, don't lose yourself. When you're trying to make someone else happy, don't lose your own happiness as well. I think that's very important.
Yeah, and I think in all honesty, women are a little not as good at that as men because we're our DNA is a little caretaking. So, we're trying to do what our kids want, or we're taking care of our parents, or we're taking care of our in-laws. And sometimes, we wake up and we may all have windows that our happiness is personal has to go on a back burner for whatever reason. But even if you have that window, you need to pull it back. You need to pull it back into your life to some degree. If you have a friend who, you feel good when you talk to that friend and you haven't talked to them, you need to, if you have to set an appointment, which I know I text people sometimes, good time to talk, ? And like just picking up the phone and calling. Set an appointment. Say, you know what, we're going to have a 30-minute conversation on the first Sunday of every month, and we're just going to get to catch up. Like, put that on the calendar, because that's important to keep it in. And there will be very few reasons you can't keep, a 15, 20-minute, 30-minute phone date with somebody to, again, maintain those relationships. I think, and I even think the pandemic put people, it was funny. I had a member message me back. She was like, I didn't realize how many things I was doing that I didn't enjoy. And she says, and actually my husband and I still like each other. And she was like, so she kind of slowed down. Well, because she was so busy doing stuff, doing so many things, like they probably weren't spending as much time together. And then you went to like for a window of that 24/7 time. And I think that slowdown has left us all a little comfortable, because we've realized a couple of things. We may have realized what we missed that we enjoy doing. Like, I'm an introvert, but I realized I missed going out to dinner with people. I'm like, I like to go out to dinner for at least to have an hour conversation. But we also started realizing that we were doing things maybe we didn't love as much. Like, I'm going to be curious. One of the things I got a lot of mixed reviews on was big holiday family gatherings. So a lot of people were writing me that they really enjoyed doing the main meal with just their small family. Mm-hmm. And then, whatever their immediate scope was. And then, instead of having, the second, third tier, everybody over, and you're having a dinner for 30 or 40, 50 people, and you're hosting it, that's a lot of work. But then some people did miss that big gathering. But some were like, I like that. And then doing like a big dessert thing somewhere with everybody. Because that's just, it's easier to just do like a dessert gathering for, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you're celebrating. I thought that was interesting. So I'm going to be curious to see where that trends in the next couple of years with the big gatherings. Like, do they stay as big, or does that change? Did we have a cultural shift on that, where we're like, we want to keep it a little more intimate, and then opening up, the after party, like I said, with desserts or something. So, but those are changes. And again, it's okay. There's not like a right or wrong answer. There's not a right or wrong answer. And I think sometimes we think things are right or wrong, and they're just not.
That is so true. And I agree with you. I like the small intimate than the big stressful everybody coming in thing. It's so much intimate. It was like less stress. It was simpler. It was almost back to the times where it's supposed to be, not the go all the time. It's like, we just focus on the people instead of focusing on the appearances of things.
Yeah. And I think people had both. Like, I think some people really missed that. And I think as long as they're the host, that's okay. Like, if you want the hoopla, then hopefully you're the host of it, and you're not expecting somebody else to do it that might be like, really, I just want to have dinner with, my husband and my 2 kids or whatever, like the big dinner, and we're just going to keep it super, super small. So you can't expect your aunt to be inviting you over if their new happy became small and intimate. And I think that's what we have to like I said, I'm eager to see how all that works its way through versus the expectation. That's kind of the key word there. Expectations, that somebody's going to do something. So it'll be, because while our happiness is personal, is important. If I had to ever give people one piece of advice, is even if you're an introvert, you still have to have people. Our happiness is usually connected to people. And and by people, I mean people you have a close relationship with. Those, and I don't mean this literally, but as those people I jokingly say, this one I would mean literally, who could you call for bail money at 3 a.m? And they would show up to help you. Like they would show up to help you, minimal questions other than what'd you get yourself into now. but who do you have these intimate relationships with? Not, I mean, I am sometimes surprised, and I have met friends in part because of what I do. I certainly met friends via social media, but usually I wouldn't put you in the pure friend category unless I've had at least a Zoom combo with you. But I've met so many people that are like, yeah, I'm friends with so-and-so, we're friends on Facebook. Like, oh, have you met them? No, I have not met them. And I'm like, okay, so you're social media friends. Like, I consider some of my social media friends. I do feel sometimes close to them because you share a lot of moments, but I also wouldn't go knock on their house with a casserole if something bad happened to them, because they would be like, who are you? And you're like, well, I read blah, blah, blah on Facebook and I want to give you this casserole. They're going to look at me like, okay, I think you're a little cuckoo. Because you're not, like I said, we have different kinds of friends now. Like we've added this other tier, essentially. We've always had friends and family. Then you've had an acquaintance or social friends. I think there's people, like I play tennis with these people every week. It doesn't necessarily mean you're beyond social. Then you have this next tier of acquaintances. And then now we have this next tier of what I call social media people. That and again, you can become friends. I did a Happiness Unites tour. And I want to get back on it, but I was doing a Happiness Unites tour. And so I met up with a lot of our members in the cities they were in, and we did stuff that made people happy, would make you happy. And, so I consider them friends, but I've now met them.
That is so cool. A tour about Happiness Unites. I love that. And please let us know if you when and if you do it again, because I would love to have you on to promote that as well.
No, I plan on, hopefully in 2023, I do plan on, redo it. Because I had a list of 100 things that I wanted to do. So, and I think I got to like list 30, among the 30s. And then I just ended up with a hospice dog for a few months. And then I ended up, then we shortly after ended up in the pandemic. So people weren't really wanting to shake your hand, no. Or people were cautious, understandably so. So so I was looking at that list the other day, and I'm like, no, I need to get back on the Happiness Unites tour, because I think people need to be reminded that happiness unites us. I always said, and this was 20 something years ago, I would say there are two emotions that really do unite people. One is grief. I think grief transcends all cultures. We know what loss is. One is, and the other I think is happiness. When we really feel good, like a smile. A smile is just this universal greeting that transcends all. Because say even things like anger and those types of things that can unite you, they don't really unite you. Those are things that are divisive, and they tear things apart. So your big ones are grief and, like I said, smiling and happiness.
So our time is up. Tell people where they can find you and what your book is again.
Well, you can go to just sohp.com, or you Google Society of Happy People. It will show up in the top of the rankings, so it's easy to find. And then my book is just called Practical Happiness. And there's links on my website that show you how to get it, or it's in bookstores. And if the bookstore doesn't have it, they can order it. And it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and the indie bookstore link. So, it's an easy read. It's a quick, easy read, or quick, easy listening to it. I say that you listen to it, so you might want to. You can confirm or deny.
Yes, it's a quick, easy read. It is very quick and very easy. So I totally recommend it. And Pamela, thank you for coming on and for sharing about happiness and how happiness is personal and how happiness changes throughout our lives. What made us happy in our teens may not make us happy in our 50s or 60s. And I love that. And I can't wait to hear more about what you're going to do next. And please like I said, keep me in mind if you do the tour, because I would love to have you come back on and talk about the tour.
Maybe we can do a podcast interview as a Happiness Unites. Like I could come actually to your studio. We can do some selfies.
That would be really cool, because you did say, well, before we got on the interview, you did say you met a lot of people in North Carolina, and it seems like you're being called to the Carolinas. So
yeah, to come visit. I was actually invited to the Happiness Unites tour to do a horse thing there. But when I was in DC, it was just like a little further of a drive than I was thinking when I found the dot that invited me. And when I say dot, I mean a city that I'd not heard of. And so I was like, I don't think I can get there and do all that in the same day. But yeah, I was invited there originally, so I need to go find that email. Maybe that's where we kick it off. Maybe we kick it off again in North Carolina.
Oh, I love that idea. So guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. For those that are listening on the podcast, for those that are watching on YouTube, and be blessed. Thank you, Pamela, for coming on. And most importantly, keep chatting. I don't know why I said chapping. And be happy. Find your own sense of happiness, because like Pamela says, happiness is personal. So thank you and have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for having me.